So Jim, it's such a pleasure to spend a few minutes having this conversation with you. And I just wanted to, preface the conversation by saying what a tremendous privilege and pleasure it is to work with you in the social impact space. And I want you to know, the sort of the impact that you've had on my life, personally and professionally, in the 3 years or so that I've known you. And now the 35 people that work at the Sorenson Impact Center, and the students, the hundreds of students that come through our program, their lives are all impacted and so much better as a result of their association with you and the tremendous center that you've created at the University of Utah. You have such an incredible story, and one of the big goals that we have been focused on at the center is really capturing that story and bringing it to life. Because when you speak at a conference and you talk about this, or when you talk about it conversationally with people, it opens their eyes. They understand what what some of these concepts mean so concretely when they hear how you kind of in a lot of ways pioneered some of the models that we're talking about. So I'd love to have you spend a minute kind of talking about how you discovered social impact, maybe for lack of a better term, or impact investing, how you kind of first came onto that. And by the way, when you came onto that, those terms didn't exist. I mean, this was the very early days, but how you sort of thought about that from the earliest days. And also I'd really love to hear about, and you've made so many investments over the course of your impact investment career, but the investment that I'm most interested in, would love to hear something from you about, is your investment in the center. And in particular, why you felt a need for that as you saw an ecosystem that needed to be developed and built up around impact investing and social impact. So I've asked 2 kind of pretty big questions, and I'll let you decide which one to take first. But
well, first of all, let me compliment you. I mean, I have mutual admiration for you and others at the center, and it really is all about the people and the engagement that they have. And that's really going to make the difference in this space. And it's great to see it grow, and great to see the brightest minds attracted to this. And that's one of the things I saw with the opportunity in experiential education at the University of Utah, in creating the center, in providing really an opportunity for students to really engage and ultimately build careers and become leaders that would be needed in the future for this space to be able to grow. I think as it relates to my early beginnings, as I look at myself and I ask myself that question, I think a lot of it is the environment and the DNA that I was given from my childhood. I had a father who was a renowned entrepreneur in his own right. He had a rags to riches story in terms of starting with nothing and then building several great companies, and through innovation, through tenacity, and through hard work, essentially really built some great businesses. I had a mother that I would say was probably one of the most compassionate, empathetic, and loving people that I know. She really was a great advocate for the underprivileged, and had tremendous desire to want to help and serve. So those were kind of the mix of genes that I came from in the environment. And as a result, I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I really liked that type of lifestyle, and it fit my personality, and I think the characteristics that I had. And I had a great mentor in that regard with my father. I also saw from my mother, the opportunity to use the resources and the intellect that I had to be able to help other people. And so as I became successful in business and wanting to make a shift in my life and looking for ways to give back and looking at typical philanthropy, I was not really satisfied with the models that I saw that were not really very efficient, that weren't accountable, and really didn't seem to move the needle much in terms of solving the big problems that we see in the world today. And so I started looking for different models, and that ultimately led me to impact investing. And then ultimately, once I was there, I became a full-on fan, and it was a passion to want to be able to do everything I could to be able to promote and to overcome the barriers and to be able to bridge those that were lacking, those things that were lacking in the ecosystem. And that ultimately led to building and establishing the Sorenson Impact Center at the University of Utah.
You've always been known, or for at least the last decade or so, you've been known as, again, from my perspective, a pioneer in the impact investing space, and in particular in the early stage impact investing space, in the sense that you have been focused on helping social enterprises that are more than just an idea. There's an actual business there, but these are businesses that are not ready for traditional financing and other ways to access capital. And there's this really kind of tough period there, which I think you refer to as the pioneering gap. Some people call it the valley of death, but some of these enterprises really, or entrepreneurs really sort of struggle to get through that, and a lot of really good ideas, good concepts die, unfortunately. And you've put a lot of your work, or a lot of your capital to work in helping to kind of bridge that pioneering gap. And you've developed this amazing reputation, this world-class reputation as somebody that's focused on that specifically. I want you to talk a little bit about how that initial focus of yours in the social impact space has sort of broadened out a little bit, and to such an extent that you and I were meeting with Speaker Paul Ryan, a few weeks ago, and my favorite part of that meeting, I don't know if you remember, when he first met you, he said, "Oh, you're the evidence-based policy guy." And that was a huge victory for me, because everybody knows you as the impact investing guy. But it seems to me that you've been able to take a lot of the same principles and concepts that you've discovered in impact investing around accountability, performance, driving resources towards things that are sustainable and scalable and that actually work, and really sort of step back a little bit and say, actually, this is not just a private sector conversation. There are ways that government could improve the way that it spends money for services. And there are ways that philanthropy could improve the way that it does business. And you've really kind of become this, one of the few people, I think, in the world that has kind of this 360-degree perspective on how you think about transforming an entire social sector to one that's more results-oriented and results-driven, that's actually going to have an impact and move the needle on some of the problems. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how that evolution happened? Did it get away from you and you wish you could claw some of that back, or was this a strategic decision for you to kind of go in that direction?
It was a natural progression. I see the impact investing space is really a spectrum, and clearly you have very early stage entrepreneurs that have social businesses that face the same kind of challenges that small businesses face in traditional markets. And I identify with those because I lived that in my own life with small businesses and going through those very difficult times, and had successes and failures along the way. And so I really identify and spent a lot of my time there. But I also see the need and look for, now that I have the financial resources to invest and portfolios, that I want to commit to businesses that address social problems or make a positive change in society, and look for the right kind of products and opportunities to do that. And as I looked at the innovation around the pay for success concept or evidence-based contracting, I saw a lot of the same disciplines and models for running a good business or making good decisions that are lead to much greater and beneficial results that could be employed in social services and the spending for social services, and a lot of practices that didn't make a lot of sense. I mean, if they were in the business world, they wouldn't make a lot of sense. I mean, you wouldn't, if you had the objective in building a house, measure your performance by how many nails you put in a piece of wood. It's the end result. It's the house. It's the outcome that you want to pay for. Well, why shouldn't we do that in how we allocate and spend, over $800 billion on the social level for social services? So these things, I think, and as I learned about them, really made a lot of sense. And I really looked at them as a continuum of this spectrum for making impact investments.
How much traction do you get? I mean, I sort of see you as being pretty cutting edge on a lot of this stuff. How much traction do you get with other folks in your networks around either the impact investing thing specifically or around kind of the evidence-based policy movement? Are people reluctant to embrace this? Are they catching on? They just sort of need to hear about it and be educated? Is there a way you can sort of generalize across your networks?
I think it is growing and it is catching on. I think younger generations get this more than older generations that may be pretty steeped in the way things have been done in the past. I think it's a bipartisan. That's one of the great things about it. I think both Democrats and Republicans, when you look at the social policy aspects, realize that this really makes sense. And that's good to have in this day and age where quite often there's such a divide in terms of the thinking. But in general, I see a real momentum building and what I'd call a quiet revolution in both the capital markets and in the way people look at and think about solving social problems.
It's been really gratifying to work with you over the years because I think there's a lot of folks in your position that feel passionately about something and they have resources to do something about it and they deploy those resources. And then I think the tendency or the temptation is to kind of step back a little bit and just let that play itself out. And you have been anything but that. You have rolled up your sleeves alongside those of us, working on investments, working on projects around the world. You've slept on dirt floors in India, in rural parts of the country where you're sort of looking at the social enterprises that you're thinking about investing in. To my mind, it's a different level of commitment than what you're used to seeing. You also go out on the road a lot to speak about this. You presented a lot of conferences. What motivates you to take it that extra level? Why did you not just make the endowment? You've done your part to kind of build the ecosystem. You could be golfing more, or I don't know, scuba diving, whatever you like to do in your free time. Instead, you're just engaged at a whole different level. What motivates you?
Well, I think certainly that upbringing. I think part of my DNA, and I've seen it both in my mother and in my father, that when there's something that they really believe in, they're all in, and I feel that way about this. I really firmly believe it. I have seen it personally with businesses that I have founded, and personally with investments that have been made, and I've seen it personally in the lives of those that have been touched. And so it is a very natural thing for me to want to champion this and look at the many ways that I can help contribute both to the education, to the advocacy, and really participating as an investor or in helping to create intermediaries to help others to invest, to help further the progress and this movement that's happening.
Well, on behalf of the whole Sorenson Impact Center, I just want to say thank you for everything you're doing to build that ecosystem, and for the impact that you're having in people's lives. I mean, at the end of the day, there are people out there that need help, and this is a really not just sort of interesting way of doing it. This is a really impactful, scalable way of bringing change to those people who need it most. So thank you for the impact that you're having, and thank you for everything that you do for us at the center. And thanks for spending a few minutes talking to us today.
Thank you for this opportunity. And I think, like most things, that anything that's worthwhile that you give to, whether it's financially or, of yourself, and I think that's the latter is probably more meaningful. The giver probably receives more than the recipient. So it's been a wonderful experience and journey for me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.